What's up guys and welcome back to the channel where in this video we will be covering chapter 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. Okay, so right off the bat I just want to say that I really enjoyed this episode. I think it was a great conclusion to this series, or at least to this season. We don't know if there is going to be a season 2 for this series or not, but I kind of feel like they put a bow on at least this portion of Boba Fett's life. So if there is going to be another season, I feel like it has to go in a completely different direction, especially given the fact that Boba did say to Fennec that he doesn't really think that this life is for them. I don't think we're going to see Boba Fett continue to rule Tatooine, and I don't really think there would be much of a story to be told there. But it is possible that we could just go in a completely different direction from here. But focusing in on this episode, from the very beginning, obviously we do come back to Tatooine and refocus our attention on Boba Fett and the events that are taking place on Tatooine. This is what we expected after sort of veering away from Boba and Fennec and that story for the last 2 episodes. And so that's where this episode begins, and actually the entire episode takes place on Tatooine. So a whole lot happens. This is a long episode. It was an hour long, I believe. And pretty early on in this episode, Grogu arrives on Tatooine. He's flown in on Luke Skywalker's X-Wing by R2-D2, and we find out very quickly that he chose the armor. In the last episode, Luke Skywalker offered him a choice. He said, you can choose this lightsaber and become a Jedi, or you can choose the gift from Din Djarin and you can go back to him. And Grogu chose the armor. Honestly, I wasn't sure that we were going to find out what decision he made at all in the Book of Boba Fett. I thought they might save that for season 3 of The Mandalorian, but I did think it was possible that he could show up and sort of play the exact role that he did in this episode. We talked about that in last week's review. So anyways, Grogu arrives, and then we go back to the affair with Boba Fett. Cad Bane actually comes to Mos Espa to negotiate with Boba. He tells Boba that the Pikes were the ones who killed the Tuskens. It wasn't the biker gang that Boba thought was responsible and that he chased down in the Slave One. And Boba takes that kind of harshly, but he also knows that Cad Bane is telling the truth. Boba tells Bane that he will only negotiate with the head of the Pike Syndicate, and so Cad Bane leaves. A bit later, Boba sends the governor's secretary out to negotiate with the Pikes, and once again, he basically just tells them that he is not willing to negotiate, and he tells them to leave. War breaks out on Tatooine. The Pike Syndicate troops disguise themselves as citizens of Mos Espa, and then they turn on Boba Fett's forces that he has stationed around the city. Boba and Din Djarin use their jetpacks and a lot of the weapons they have, and they give us some really cool action. I really enjoy all of the interactions that we've had both in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett between Boba and Din Djarin, so that was really fun. The Syndicate actually gains the advantage, and it looks like Boba Fett is going to lose this battle, but then the people of Freetown arrive, and a little bit later, Boba leaves to retrieve his Rancor, and then Grogu also arrives. But in this time, the Pikes also have these 2 massive battle droids with shield generators, and it sort of seems like it's going to be close to impossible for Boba to win this battle. But the arrival of the Rancor really shifts the tide, and then Grogu also plays a decent role here as well. So Grogu and Din have this very brief reunion. Din sees that Grogu is wearing the armor, but then they're obviously distracted by what's going on around them, by the big battle around them. During this battle, Din Djarin wields the Darksaber a couple of times, and we still see that he is struggling with it. He's still working against the blade, whether it's something he's doing or the Darksaber is literally denying him for some reason. He's definitely still having some trouble, but he also has a pretty cool moment where he takes out one of the droids with the help of Grogu and I believe the Rancor as well. Cad Bane returns toward the end of the battle, and he separates Boba from his Rancor, and then Boba and Bane have a second standoff where shots are actually fired. Bane wins because he pretty much always does, and it looks like he is going to kill Boba. If he had been smart and not walked right up to him, he probably would have won this battle. But then Boba uses his staff that he got from the Tusken Raiders to gain the upper hand, and then he murders Cad Bane. Personally, I think this was a fitting end for Cad Bane. I think it was a really cool battle between he and Boba. It was a bit surprising for me that they did kill him in this show, but I'm certainly not mad about it. I thought it was really cool. I assume there are going to be some people who were at least like caught off guard by it or whatever, but I think it was a fitting end, and I mean, Cad Bane is pretty old at this point, so it worked for me. But because the Rancor and Boba Fett were separated during this encounter, the Rancor just sort of runs wild, and it ends up attacking Din after Din Djarin tries to ride him as Boba Fett was. And then we have this moment where it looks like the Rancor might actually kill Din, and Grogu steps up and he uses the Force to put the Rancor to sleep, which was really cool. And then Grogu like snuggles up right next to the Rancor and goes to sleep as well. So that was a funny but also very heroic moment for Grogu. Then moving toward the end of the episode, Fennec kills the last of the Syndicate on Tatooine. And on that note, I just want to point out that Boba and Fennec both really get to shine in this episode in a way that we really hadn't seen them do to this point. They each did have their moments, but Fennec in this scene really has a couple of brutal kills at the end, and it sort of reflects the skills of her past life as a bounty hunter, and I think that's really cool to see. Move a couple more minutes down the road, and there's a celebration in Mos Espa. The people are praising Boba for his leadership, and then, as I mentioned in the start of this video, Boba says to Fennec that he doesn't really think that this life is for them. Fennec then questions him and says, well, if we're not going to protect these people, who will? And then we flash to a little moment between Grogu and Din up in space in the Starfighter, and the episode closes out from there. But there is a post-end credits scene which reveals that Cobb Vanth is indeed alive. There's a shot of him in Boba Fett's Bacta tank, and we also have the mechanic guy who saved Fennec Shand a couple episodes earlier, and it looks like he's about to go to work on Cobb Vanth. So Cobb Vanth lives, and I think it's a pretty reasonable theory that Boba is going to hand Mos Espa over to Cobb Vanth, and he is now going to watch over Mos Espa while Boba and Fennec go on to their next adventure, whatever that may be. Again, I'm not sure that we're going to have a season 2. I think they could go either way. Obviously, they could tell another story if they want to, but at the same time, this story has been wrapped up very nicely, so this could be the end, and we could just see Boba Fett here and there in future stories, whether that be in The Mandalorian, which I think would be pretty likely, or something else altogether. But that is going to wrap things up for this video, so let me know what you guys thought about this episode and what you thought about this series as a whole. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a thumbs up to support the channel, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and of course, may the Force be with you always.